The spark of conflict. In the far reaches of the galaxy, the Galactic Council, a coalition of advanced alien species, ruled with an iron fist. They maintained order across the stars through fear, subjugating lesser civilizations that dared challenge their authority. Earth, a relatively new member of the galactic community, was viewed with suspicion and disdain. Despite humanity's advancements in technology and space exploration, the Council never fully accepted humans as equals. They were seen as primitive, unpredictable, and dangerous, a species to be monitored closely. Christian Jackson, a renowned human explorer, discovered a crashed Arcturian ship while charting the unexplored regions of the Andromeda sector. Inside the wreckage, he found Tyro, a young Arcturian boy, gravely injured and on the brink of death. Despite the tension between humans and Arcturians, Christian couldn't leave the child to die. He brought Tyro back to Earth, tending to his wounds and nursing him back to health in secret. Christian knew that if the Galactic Council found out, it could ignite a conflict, but his conscience wouldn't allow him to abandon the innocent child. Word of Tyro's disappearance reached the Arcturian leadership, who immediately suspected foul play. Convinced that humans had captured and tortured the boy to extract military secrets, the Arcturians demanded his immediate return. The Galactic Council, siding with the Arcturians, issued a stern ultimatum to Earth: return Tyro unharmed or face severe consequences. Christian, aware of the looming threat, decided to return Tyro himself. He set off in a small ship, hoping to reach the Arcturian homeworld and prove his innocence. However, Commander Zorks, an Arcturian military leader, had other plans. Zorks was convinced that Christian had tortured Tyro and was determined to bring him to justice. He tracked Christian's ship across the galaxy, determined to intercept him before he could reach the Council. As Christian approached Jupiter's orbit, Zorks's forces caught up with him. A fierce firefight ensued, and Christian's ship was critically damaged. With his engines failing and fuel leaking, he made a desperate dive into the sulfurous plumes of Io, one of Jupiter's moons, hoping to hide from his pursuers. Despite his best efforts, Christian's ship was eventually captured, and he and Tyro were dragged before the Arcturian Council in chains. The Arcturian Council, blinded by their hatred for humans, refused to listen to Christian's pleas of innocence. They staged a sham trial, condemning him to life imprisonment on a remote prison planet. Tyro, who tried to vouch for Christian's kindness, was silenced and taken back to the Arcturian homeworld. News of Christian's unjust treatment spread across Earth, sparking outrage and fear. The United Nations declared DEFCON 1, and Earth's military forces prepared for an inevitable war. As the Arcturian invasion fleet massed in the Kuiper Belt, poised to strike Earth, Christian managed to send a final transmission, warning humanity of the impending attack. His message was cut off as he was dragged away, but the words "humanity's innocence" echoed across the galaxy. Earth faced annihilation for a crime they didn't commit, and the humans knew they would have to fight with everything they had to survive. Tyro, now back on the Arcturian homeworld, saw the escalating tensions and knew he had to act. He slipped away from his captors and managed to hijack a small fighter craft. With the Arcturian Council distracted by their preparations for war, Tyro raced back to Earth, determined to stop the conflict before it was too late. On Earth, General Marcus Thompson received Tyro's message with a mixture of shock and hope. Tyro's willingness to help was a sign that not all Arcturians were blinded by hatred. The general knew that they had to act fast. With Tyro's guidance, he launched a daring rescue mission to retrieve Christian and bring him back to Earth. The fate of both species now hung in the balance, and the actions of a few brave individuals would determine the outcome of this galactic conflict. The dawn of war, the rescue mission was a perilous gamble. General Thompson assembled his best pilots and soldiers, including Sergeants O'Neill and Hendricks, who were veterans of countless battles. Their mission was simple yet daunting: infiltrate the Arcturian prison planet, rescue Christian Jackson, and return to Earth before the Arcturian fleet could launch its full-scale assault. With Tyro's insider knowledge of Arcturian defenses, they had a slim but vital chance of success. As the rescue team launched from Earth, the tension was palpable. The sleek, experimental SF-22 Raptors, armed with the latest human weaponry, streaked through space towards their target. Tyro led the way in his stolen fighter, navigating through asteroid fields and enemy patrols with a skill that belied his age. The Arcturian prison planet loomed ahead, a desolate world shrouded in darkness, its surface dotted with fortress-like structures and shielded by a massive energy grid. The Raptors descended into the atmosphere, their engines blazing as they cut through the planet's thick clouds. Arcturian fighters immediately responded, and the sky erupted in a chaotic dogfight. The Raptors, though outnumbered, were faster and more maneuverable, and they managed to punch a hole through the enemy defenses. As they neared the prison complex, Tyro transmitted the coordinates of Christian's cell block, and the team prepared for the final assault. Sergeants O'Neill and Hendricks led a dozen Space Force commandos in a desperate charge onto the planet's surface. They breached the outer walls with explosive charges, fighting their way through narrow corridors filled with Arcturian guards. The prison's interior was a labyrinth of strobing emergency lights and blaring alarms, the perfect setting for a deadly ambush. The commandos moved with precision, their railguns and plasma cannons cutting down any who stood in their way. At last, they reached Christian's cell block. O'Neill kicked in the door, revealing the battered and bruised explorer chained to the wall. Despite his injuries, Christian's eyes blazed with determination. "About damn time," he croaked, as Hendricks shot the locks off his chains. The team quickly rearmed Christian and began their extraction, but the prison's alarms had already summoned reinforcements. Arcturian soldiers poured into the corridors, hissing and snarling behind their organic battle armor. As the humans fought their way back to the surface, Tyro provided cover from above, strafing the enemy positions with pinpoint accuracy. But the Arcturians were relentless, and the human momentum began to falter. Just as it seemed they would be overwhelmed, Tyro made a daring move. He swooped in low, his fighter's cannons blazing as he mowed down the Arcturian soldiers blocking the escape route. "This way!" he shouted over the comms. "I'll cover you." With Tyro's help, the commandos managed to reach their boarding craft, but their victory was short-lived. As the last commando stumbled through the hatch, a lucky shot hit Tyro's fighter. The young Arcturian's ship spiraled away, trailing smoke and fire. Christian lunged for the airlock, but Hendricks hauled him back. "I'll get him," the sergeant said, his eyes hard. "Take the ship and go." Christian hesitated, then nodded. As the boarding craft blasted off, Hendricks leaped into a shuttle and peeled out of the bay, pushing his engines to the red line in a desperate bid to reach Tyro before his ship disintegrated. Meanwhile, on Earth, the situation had reached a boiling point. The Arcturian fleet was amassing in the Kuiper Belt, and Earth's military forces were bracing for the inevitable assault. Civilian populations were being evacuated to underground bunkers, and the entire planet was on high alert. In the United Nations chamber, General Thompson presented the evidence of Christian's innocence to a room filled with anxious leaders. The stakes had never been higher. "We must act now," Thompson urged, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Christian Jackson is guilty of nothing more than compassion. If we don't intervene, we will lose our best chance at proving our innocence and stopping this war before it begins." The council members debated fiercely, but the gravity of the situation was undeniable. With a razor-thin majority, the Secretary General gave the go-ahead for a full-scale rescue mission and the defense of Earth. "General, you have a go," he said wearily. "Bring our man home." Thompson saluted and strode from the room, already barking orders into his comlink. "O'Neill, Hendricks, gear up and get your men to the hangar. We launch in 10. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of two civilizations rested on the outcome. The battle for Earth, the human fleet assembled in the asteroid belt, their ships gleaming under the cold light of distant stars. The Raptors were joined by Earth's most advanced warships, including the newly commissioned SF-45 Valkyries, equipped with cutting-edge human weapons technology. The fleet's mission was clear: delay the Arcturian advance long enough for the rescue mission to succeed. General Thompson took his place aboard the command ship, his eyes locked on the tactical display. The Arcturian armada was a terrifying sight, a massive force of battle cruisers and fighter swarms that stretched across the entire sensor array. They were closing in on Earth, and the first skirmishes had already begun. Red 2, standing by, came the voice of Captain Alex Simmons, leader of the Valkyrie Squadron. His voice crackled over the comms as he prepared his team for the fight of their lives. All wings report in. Red 3 ready to rock. Red 4, let's show these squid heads what humans can do. Remember your training, Simmons said, allowing himself a grim smile. Hit them hard and fast. For Earth. The Valkyries dove into the fray, their plasma cannons blazing as they engaged the Arcturian fighters. The battle was fierce and chaotic, with explosions lighting up the darkness of space like a deadly fireworks display. The humans fought valiantly, their missiles and cannon fire taking a heavy toll on the enemy. But the Arcturians had the advantage of numbers, and slowly, inexorably, the human lines began to buckle. "We can't hold them," a Space Force captain groaned over the comms, her voice ragged with exhaustion. "There's too many." Her transmission was cut short as an Arcturian beam sliced her ship in half. The situation was growing dire, and General Thompson knew they needed a miracle. As he scanned the battlefield, his attention was drawn to a small blip on the radar, a ship breaking through the chaos. It was Hendricks, piloting the shuttle he had used to rescue Tyro. The young Arcturian was unconscious but alive, slumped in the co-pilot's seat. Hendricks gritted his teeth as he pushed the shuttle to its limits, weaving through the debris field toward the safety of the human fleet. "General Thompson, this is Hendricks," he called over the comms. "I've got Tyro. Requesting immediate clearance for extraction." "Copy that, Hendricks," Thompson replied, his voice laced with relief. "Get him to the medbay immediately. We'll cover your approach." As the shuttle streaked toward the command ship, the human fleet redoubled its efforts, forming a protective wall around their comrades. The Arcturians pressed the attack, but the humans held firm, determined to protect the boy who might hold the key to stopping the war. On the surface of Earth, the Arcturian assault was fully underway. Massive dropships slammed down in the ruins of shattered cities, disgorging hordes of genetically engineered alien shock troops. Each Arcturian soldier stood over 8 feet tall, their bodies a terrifying combination of fangs, claws, and rippling muscle. They surged through the rubble, seeking human prey with an insatiable hunger for slaughter. But the humans were not without their own defenses. Tanks and powered armor moved up in support, and the human defenders opened fire from the shattered remnants of their homes. Heavy machine guns, anti-tank rockets, and laser grenades poured everything they had into the alien invaders. Arcturian bodies piled high in the streets, their blue ichor staining the pavement. But for every Arcturian cut down, more took their place, heedless of loss and driven by an unrelenting desire to annihilate humanity. In low orbit, General Thompson watched the battle unfold, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and every decision he made could mean the difference between survival and extinction. "Punch it!" he ordered as the shuttle carrying Tyro and Hendricks swooped back into formation. Maximum burn for Earth, and pray we're not too late. The Raptors accelerated into a streak of light, tearing across the starscape at full military power. Below, on the blue-green sphere they once called home, the final reckoning had begun. The fate of humanity and the entire galaxy would be decided in the next few hours, and the outcome was far from certain. The tide. Turns as the human fleet closed in on Earth. The situation grew increasingly desperate. The Arcturian armada was relentless, their forces pressing the attack on all fronts. On the ground, the human defenders were pushed to their limits, fighting tooth and nail to hold the line against the alien invaders. The once great cities of Earth were reduced to smoldering ruins, and the skies were filled with the acrid smoke of burning metal and flesh. General Thompson knew that they needed to turn the tide, and fast. The arrival of Tyro had given them a glimmer of hope, but it would take more than one boy to stop the full might of the Arcturian war machine. As the shuttle carrying Tyro and Hendricks touched down on the command ship's deck, Thompson was already formulating a plan. "Get Tyro to the medbay," he ordered as the ship's medical team rushed to meet them. "We need to stabilize him and get him ready for what comes next." As the doctors worked to revive Tyro, Thompson turned his attention to the tactical display. The Arcturian fleet was massing for a final push, their ships forming a tight formation as they prepared to break through the human defenses. The battle had reached a critical juncture, and Thompson knew that they were running out of time. "Prepare all remaining forces for a concentrated strike on the Arcturian flagship," Thompson ordered, his voice resolute. "We take out their command structure, and the rest of the fleet will fall apart." The plan was risky, but it was their best chance. The human fleet reformed, their ships bristling with weapons as they moved into position. The Raptors, Valkyries, and every available ship in the fleet turned their focus on the Arcturian flagship, a massive vessel that loomed like a dark shadow over the battlefield. As the human ships closed in, the Arcturians unleashed a withering barrage of fire, their plasma cannons and energy beams slicing through the void. The human ships weaved and dodged, returning fire with everything they had. The battle was fierce, with both sides taking heavy losses. But the humans pressed on, their determination fueled by the knowledge that failure was not an option. On the ground, the situation was equally dire. The Arcturian shock troops continued to advance, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the human defenders. In the ruins of New York, Sergeant David Johnson and his squad fought a desperate rear-guard action, holding the line against wave after wave of alien attackers. The streets were littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, both human and Arcturian, and the air was thick with the smell of blood and burning flesh. "We're not going to make it," one of Johnson's men shouted as an Arcturian brute charged through the rubble, its claws slashing through the air. Johnson took aim with his railgun, firing a high-velocity round that punched through the alien's skull, dropping it in a spray of blue ichor. "Hold the line," Johnson shouted, his voice hoarse from hours of fighting. "We can't let them break through." But even as Johnson and his men fought with everything they had, the Arcturian forces continued to press forward. The human defenses were crumbling, and it seemed only a matter of time before the aliens overran the last strongholds of humanity. Back in orbit, the human fleet made its final approach to the Arcturian flagship. The battle had reached a fever pitch, with both sides trading devastating blows. The human ships were battered and scarred, their hulls riddled with damage from the relentless assault. But they pressed on, their focus unwavering as they closed in on their target. "Target the flagship's primary reactor," Thompson ordered, as the human ships unleashed their final salvo. "Take it out, and the rest of the fleet will fall apart." The human weapons struck true, their warheads detonating against the flagship's hull with cataclysmic force. The ship's shields flickered and failed, and a series of massive explosions ripped through its superstructure. The Arcturian flagship began to break apart, its pieces tumbling through space as secondary explosions ripped through its hull. As the flagship disintegrated, the remaining Arcturian ships began to falter. Without their command structure, they lost cohesion, their formations breaking apart as confusion spread through their ranks. The human fleet seized the opportunity, pressing the attack and driving the Arcturians back. On the ground, the tide of battle began to turn. With the destruction of the flagship, the Arcturian shock troops lost their coordination, their movements becoming erratic and disorganized. The human defenders rallied, pushing back against the alien invaders with renewed vigor. The streets of New York, once on the brink of being overrun, were cleared of Arcturian forces, as the humans fought back with a ferocity born of desperation. In the med bay of the command ship, Tyro finally awoke. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked around in confusion before focusing on the face of General Thompson, who stood at his bedside. "Welcome back, Tyro," Thompson said with a relieved smile. "We've been through hell, but we're still standing." Tyro nodded weakly, his voice barely a whisper. Did we stop them?" Thompson's expression hardened. "Not yet, but we're getting there. And we're going to need your help to finish this." Tyro's eyes widened with determination, and he struggled to sit up. "Tell me what I need to do." Thompson placed a hand on Tyro's shoulder, a gesture of both reassurance and resolve. "We're going to make sure they never threaten Earth again. But first, we need to send a message that the Galactic Council can't ignore." As the battle for Earth continued, the humans and their unlikely ally, Tyro, prepared to take the fight to the heart of the Arcturian Empire. The final confrontation was fast approaching, and the fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy hung in the balance. The final push with Tyro stabilized and fully briefed, the time had come to execute the final phase of General Thompson's plan. The destruction of the Arcturian flagship had shifted the momentum in favor of the human forces, but the battle was far from over. The Galactic Council had to be made to understand the consequences of their actions, and to do that, they needed to strike at the heart of the Arcturian Empire itself. "All ships, prepare for immediate jump to Arcturus Prime," Thompson ordered, his voice echoing through the command deck. "We're taking the fight to their doorstep. This ends now." The human fleet, battered but resolute, began the process of reformation. The ships aligned into precise formations, their hulls still scarred from the brutal engagements around Earth. Each vessel carried the weight of countless lives lost, but also the hope of countless more that could still be saved. Tyro stood beside General Thompson, his youthful face now hardened with the determination of someone who had seen too much too soon. "Are you ready for this?" Thompson asked, looking down at the young Arcturian. Tyro nodded, his eyes reflecting both fear and resolve. "I have to be. They need to understand that this war was a mistake." Thompson clapped Tyro on the shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that transcended their species. "We'll make them see that together." The countdown began, and with a final flare of energy, the human fleet entered warp, hurtling through the fabric of space toward Arcturus Prime. The journey was brief, but the tension was palpable. Every soldier, every pilot, every crew member knew that this was their last stand. There would be no retreat, no fallback plan. Victory or annihilation were the only outcomes. As the fleet emerged from warp, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Arcturus Prime, the jewel of the Arcturian Empire, lay before them, a planet-sized fortress encased in a shell of steel and energy shields. Massive defense platforms orbited the planet, bristling with weaponry capable of vaporizing entire fleets. This was the heart of the enemy, and it was a fortress designed to be impenetrable. But General Thompson had a plan, one that hinged on Tyro's knowledge of Arcturian systems. "This is where you come in, Tyro," Thompson said, guiding the young Arcturian to the command console. "You're going to help us disable their shields. Once they're down, we hit them with everything we've got." Tyro's hands trembled as he worked the console, his alien fingers dancing over the holographic interface. "I've never done anything like this before," he admitted, fear creeping into his voice. "You can do this, Tyro," Thompson reassured him. "You're the only one who can." With a deep breath, Tyro focused, tapping into his knowledge of Arcturian technology. He began to input commands, bypassing security protocols and accessing the planetary defense grid. It was a race against time, as the Arcturian forces quickly realized what was happening. The defense platforms activated, unleashing a storm of firepower on the human fleet. "Shields are holding, but we can't take this for long," Captain Simmons reported, his Valkyrie squadron weaving through the hail of plasma fire. "Tyro, we need those shields down now!" Tyro gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead as he pushed the system to its limits. Finally, with a triumphant cry, he broke through the last firewall. "I've got it! Disabling the shields now!" The command was sent, and across Arcturus Prime, the energy shields flickered and then collapsed. The planet was vulnerable, its defenses exposed to the full might of the human fleet. "All ships, fire at will," Thompson ordered, his voice filled with the weight of finality. "Target their command centers, weapon facilities, leave nothing intact." The human fleet unleashed a devastating barrage of firepower. Cyclonic plasma drills, antimatter warheads, and railgun salvos tore into the planetary defenses. The surface of Arcturus Prime erupted in a series of cataclysmic explosions as vital infrastructure was obliterated. The Arcturian fleet, now disorganized and leaderless, struggled to mount a coherent defense. But even as the battle raged, Tyro wasn't finished. "I need to send a message to the Galactic Council," he said, his voice filled with a newfound authority. "They need to know what they've done." Thompson nodded. "Do it." Tyro tapped into the communications array, broadcasting his message across the galaxy. His voice, though young, carried the weight of his experiences and the horrors he had witnessed. "This is Tyro, son of the Arcturian Empire. I stand with humanity, not as their enemy, but as a victim of the Galactic Council's cruelty. They tortured an innocent child, and in doing so, they have ignited a fire that will consume us all if we do not stop this madness. I call on the Council to end this war before it's too late. We must find another way." The message echoed across the stars, reaching every corner of the galaxy. It was a plea for peace, but also a warning. The destruction of Arcturus Prime was not just a victory for humanity, it was a signal that they would not be cowed by threats or violence. As the last of the Arcturian defenses crumbled, the human fleet pulled back, leaving the planet in ruins. The Galactic Council had been shown the full extent of Earth's fury, and the consequences of their actions were laid bare for all to see. General Thompson looked out at the shattered remains of Arcturus Prime, his expression a mixture of triumph and sorrow. "It's done," he said quietly, "but at what cost?" Tyro stood beside him, his eyes fixed on the planet that had once been his home. "We've won the battle," he said softly, "but now we have to win the peace." Thompson nodded, understanding the gravity of the task that lay ahead. The war was not over, but the seeds of change had been planted. Whether they would bear the fruit of peace or the thorns of further conflict remained to be seen. The price of victory, the destruction of Arcturus Prime, sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. News of the human fleet's decisive victory spread quickly, and with it came the realization that Earth was not the helpless world the Galactic Council had once believed. The Council members, scattered across their respective homeworlds, were forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions. The war they had unleashed had spiraled out of control, and now, with one of their most powerful members reduced to ash, they faced a choice: continue the conflict and risk total annihilation, or seek a peace that could preserve what remained of their civilizations. On Earth, the mood was one of grim celebration. The victory over the Arcturians had come at a tremendous cost. Cities lay in ruins, millions were dead or displaced, and the planet itself bore the scars of the Arcturian invasion. Yet there was a sense of relief, too. Relief that the worst had passed, and that humanity had survived against impossible odds. In the aftermath of the battle, General Thompson convened a meeting with his top commanders. The command center was a hive of activity, with officers and aides moving swiftly to coordinate relief efforts and secure Earth's defenses against any potential counterattacks. "We've struck a decisive blow against the Arcturians," Thompson began, his voice steady but weary. "But we can't afford to be complacent. The Galactic Council will be forced to respond, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next." Captain Simmons, still bearing the marks of the battle, nodded in agreement. "Our forces are spread thin, General. We need to regroup and consolidate our defenses. If the Council decides to retaliate, we'll be hard-pressed to hold them off."